Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming along to my talk today on effective DevOps metrics. There's a bit of a gap because my font didn't translate into PowerPoint world. So I want to talk a little bit today about metrics in the context of a healthy organization, not metrics in the context of being beaten over the head with numbers until you can do things the way people want you to do it. So this is a rough outline of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the proliferation of different ways of measuring stuff. There's lots of stuff out there at the moment, so we're going to quickly tackle what's going on in that world. Then I'm going to talk about something which is completely new. I was working on that this week. It could go terribly wrong, so work with me on this today, because the Nimona method is brand new. You'll be the first people in the whole world to hear about this. I'll then cover a little bit of visibility and sharing of metrics. This is some important stuff around that to try and keep it healthy. And then I'm going to take questions. So all of the stuff that I've said that's confusing, you get an opportunity to tell me it was confusing, and I'll try and explain it in a better way. So my name's Steve. I work at Octopus. It's an Australian company, but you'll notice that I don't have an Australian accent. I'm based in the UK. And I've got loads of stuff to promote, which is now on the screen. So I've written a book on Octopus Deploy, which is the tool that I work on, but I've also written a white paper that you might find useful if this session is interesting to you, called Measuring Continuous Delivery in DevOps, and that is free. Go and download it. It's yours. So let's get into the session. And again, my translation into PowerPoint has some formatting issues, but work with me on those. How do we measure software delivery in the modern era? And when I say the modern era, I mean, we're not doing phased software delivery anymore, hopefully. We've kind of moved even beyond Agile into this new world where we've got all this research which helps us understand stuff that really works. That's what we call the modern software era. So we're talking continuous delivery, DevOps, there's platform engineering, SRE, lots of cool stuff going on. So how do we measure it? And the answer is, there's lots of ways of measuring software delivery in the modern era. So I may have lost battery on my clicker. Yes, lots of ways of measuring software delivery currently. Space framework, DORA metrics, McKinsey have a developer index, there's all kinds of stuff. It's a bit overwhelming, and that's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to make it really super simple. So one of the things that I want us to bear in mind is during Agile, people said this a lot. We're going to do twice the work in half the time. We put it on the front of books and everything. But now what we want to do is think about doing, basically getting twice the impact with half the work, okay? And although I've got pictures of cats up here, there's actually research to back this up. So it's a serious subject. So that leads us to this new method that I'm going to share today, which I've called the Nimona method. Now, Nimona is a cartoon. And my daughter watched this every morning for 6 months. So I'm an expert in this cartoon. You may not have seen it. I think it's available on Netflix. It almost never happened because the company that was making it dropped it. Someone else picked it up and made it. If you don't know the story, it doesn't matter too much, but to know that this is Nimona. And throughout the film, she gets into various sticky situations, but her plan is the route out of sticky situations. And it's this plan that we're going to use to look at metrics. And the plan looks like this. Something, 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 we win, okay? And that's how we're going to look at metrics. It's how we're going to look at how we do software delivery. This probably isn't serious enough for you to take back to your desk and share with your bosses. So we're going to do a slightly different version of this. There we go. Same thing, but now we can show it to the boss. That's good news. Something, 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 we win. That's how we're going to approach it. So I'm going to start with the end in mind here. The we win part. Now, for your organization, we win probably means money, right? You make money as an organization. Not every organization does this. Some organizations like to save bees or reduce car accidents, whatever it is your company does. That's the thing that we want to get in the end. But it's very hard to tie this back to when I'm writing lines of code. How does this line of code help the company make money or make it save bees? It's not always direct. So we're going to have to work our way to a measure that we can have for software delivery that will connect back to this so that our work helps the organization succeed. So that's the end in mind. We're going to now kind of rewind back up to the first something. So we need to demystify all of these somethings. I definitely don't recommend that you go to your bosses with the somethings. We need to give them a better name. So the first something, we're going to call this capabilities. That sounds very business-like. Capabilities, that just means something that you can do, some practice, some way of working, some technique. And there's loads of ideas for this. Does anyone know what this diagram is over on this side? Don't know if anyone recognizes this. I've redrawn it. It's quite old. This was designed by Kent Beck, and it's the practices of extreme programming. So there's things like pair programming, short releases, continuous integration, coding standards, and there's lots of lines on here because each of those things kind of helps the other things be more successful. The slightly more modern version of that is this list of capabilities, which is from DORA, which is a research group within Google. And the main difference is, this was the idea that was coming out of people that were practicing software delivery and working out what worked. It was quite intuitive, but it was very good. This one is the one that's backed by research, and a lot of this stuff is confirming what Kent said. So he was right on a lot of things. So this is just a list of ideas that you can use to deliver software better, but you have to decide which ones are going to work for you. So that's going to have to be part of our mechanism here. So yeah, monitoring observability, test automation, lots of cool stuff. So the next thing we need is to know which of those things to pick and to know whether they're working. Kind of need a way of measuring those things. And this is the part where we can narrow things down from all of those frameworks and recommendations to a much smaller set. And that small set is these. Again, this box here is from the DORA research. What they found in the research is if you do those things, especially these four here, things like throughput and stability of your software delivery process, they help the end goals. So they found organizations that were doing these very technical things were actually succeeding at the business things. We're also doing some original research at the moment, and this one is turning out to be very important, code review time. One of the biggest inhibitors of successful software delivery is that you've made the change, and it's sat there waiting for someone to decide that change can be merged into your main line so that it can get to customers. And no matter which other metric you look at, it kind of keeps coming back to this one, right? Because if it takes you a week to approve a pull request, that's slowing down your whole system for a week, right? Most other stuff in your deployment pipeline, it's 2025, it's probably automated, but that pull request isn't. So it's like, it's the last trip hazard before good things. And we're finding this for software delivery. It's also a massive problem for GitOps, where infrastructure changes, where a pull request holds the whole thing up, and then you end up with that situation where you now have 5 or 6 pull requests, and then someone gets lucky because their one goes in, and someone else gets hit with the merge problems, and like it starts this horrible chain of events. So code review time is super important. The other one that's interesting is this user centricity one. So DORA for a decade have been talking about change lead times, deployment frequency, change failure rates, and recovery times. And these things improve your performance, your product's performance, as well as your organization's performance. Turns out if you're very user-centric, you can have worse metrics here because you're not delivering as frequently, but because you're connected to your users, the changes you give them are actually the right ones. So you need less tries to be successful. So it doesn't matter if you're not deploying as often. So that's like an interesting plot twist in the DevOps world. So the final one, developer satisfaction. This is a really useful one. It's very easy to collect because you just look around your team, see if they're smiling or not. If they're not smiling, 2 weeks later, these other metrics start dropping. Okay, early warning system. So you don't need to invest in any tools for this. If you're working remotely, you might want to collect a smiley face emoji each time someone finishes a task. That's a simple way of doing it. So don't overinvest. So this is like a really small set of metrics that you can use to help with that. technical piece. And these are all things you can measure quite easily, locally, within your team. So hopefully none of these would be difficult to get hold of. If you can't get them from your systems, just ask people. It's like, when did you last deploy? Yesterday. When are you going to deploy again? Next week. All right, that's weekly deployments. That's enough to get you going. You don't need to have perfect numbers, but some of your tools might give you this out of the box, and that's fine too. So we've got our capabilities, things we can do. We've got our measurements, things that tell us if it's working or not. Final piece, this is kind of crucial, but it's also kind of missing a lot of the time, is a continuous improvement process. So I'm finding a lot of cases where people come to the DORA community where we talk about metrics all the time. We're the cool kids. And they want to know how to measure something very precisely. What's the precise start time for change lead time? Is it when I do my first commit, or is it when I decide to push it to mainline? You know, does it include the development time or not? It doesn't, but that's not so important. So that all of this detail about this precise metrics, but then they don't use them for anything, right? It's like they're collecting dashboards of metrics, but it's not part of a discussion. Sometimes, this is probably the worst thing you can do with them, they just put them in a management report. So the managers of a company are getting a change lead time, and they're like, why do I care about this? Is it making me money? Is it saving the bees? If not, I don't care. So we want to make sure that we have a continuous improvement process, and there's loads of ideas for this as well. I'm not going to prescribe which ideas you should use, but if you're looking for something, this is a great book by Esther Darby, Diana Larson, David Horowitz, called Agile Retrospectives. And there's lots of different ways you can run a meeting with your team to say, what's not really zinging along, and how can we find a way of improving it? So there's loads of different formats you can use to try and keep it fresh, to try and make sure that people switch into a different mode of thinking. So that's a really useful book. And this is kind of like a fundamental improvement process, the process Carter. And the idea is that it's all about working out where are we today, where do we need to be, now how do we get there, right? So you're kind of thinking about the current state and the future state, which helps you to think, instead of just randomly doing one of these capabilities, you can be a bit more targeted with those. So this is the diagram that we can now give to the bosses. We've got a cycle, always has to be a cycle or an infinity loop, because that's what sells. We have our capabilities, we are measuring. The measuring tells us if the capabilities are working and which areas we might want to focus on for improvement. And we've got our continuous improvement process, which is coordinating that. And it keeps going around. Just keep turning the handle on that one. But we all know, secretly, it means this. Something, 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 we win. Right? That's how it works. It's a really simple process. So, yeah, hopefully that will be useful. Now, this is the crucial bit, because this is where metrics can end up literally making your lives miserable. We don't want to use metrics aggregated across teams. We definitely don't want to use the metrics as a league table between teams. Okay? It's not like if you've got a team doing a web app, you would expect them to maybe deploy more often than a team that's working on some complex subsystem that you're relying on. Okay, so we don't want to league table things and force people to rush. We definitely do not use these metrics to compare team members, okay? Yes, programming is great, code is important, but there's loads of other things developers are doing which are valuable. For example, speaking to customers, which won't be reflected in these metrics. And if you use the metrics in a way that discourages cross-team collaboration, speaking to customers, stopping and thinking about the work, like, literally, you'll be like, we can't do a retrospective because that means we might do one less deployment and then we'll be in trouble, okay? So we don't do those. We just use them in our own team to see how we're performing and inform that continuous improvement process. Okay, so be a bit selfish. The metrics are yours. If your managers need metrics, give them something that's relevant to your business. So if you're in e-commerce, abandoned basket rates is a much better metric for people to manage the business, okay? Transaction throughput rates, you know, how much money is flowing through the system, things like that. Don't give them these DORA metrics, don't give them, you know, the user centricity metric. So it's just it's not meaningful for them. And we've got a simple way of organizing our thoughts on this. needs a quick bit of explanation. Elevated metrics are ones you're sharing outside of your team. Internal metrics are ones that you're keeping to yourself. Okay, so that's like 2 dimensions. We've got a red line, because when you move it above that red line, you sometimes hurt yourself. We then also have like different timescales for metrics. And if you're monitoring your software, this will be recognizable, because this is like monitoring observability for the human system. So you've got some stuff you want to track long term. You need to know what's going on with that forever. Like throughput, that's deployment frequency, lead time for changes. You always want to know what's going on with that. But you've also got stuff that you want in the background. You want an alarm to go off if the numbers start going bad, but you don't want to put it on a dashboard. As soon as you put something on a dashboard, everyone thinks that's the most important thing in your company. So you're just going to keep them in the background, and an alarm will go off. Your code reviews are now taking more than 3 hours to complete. And then you've got some temporary stuff, and this is where you say, let's focus on a particular area and improve it, and then once we feel that that area is complete, we can either throw that metric away, we don't need it anymore, or we can move it into that kind of background long-term tracking. Okay, so it's a really simple kind of matrix. Whenever you're thinking about a metric, just kind of think for a minute. Like if you're thinking about putting something up here, like think again. Like this is not a good zone for you to put stuff that in 6 months' time, it's very hard to remove it, because they're like, oh, we got the latest report and this thing was missing. You're like, oh, it's not important anymore. And they're like, no, it is, because we talk about it now in the boardroom. Like, you gave it to us, you got to keep giving it to us. So we want to avoid that. So, quick summary, and then we can get to questions. Lots of different ways of doing metrics. Simple is always better. If the number is not going to help you understand what needs to be improved, or if it is improving, it's not worth collecting. The Nimona method, which we converted into a nice business-friendly cycle, that's your way of thinking about it, right? Something, 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 we win. We have some technical capabilities, some process capabilities, cultural capabilities. We are measuring those, we're improving, we're making money. Happy days. And just a real cautionary tale on that sharing. That goes wrong a lot. And I cannot stress enough, actually, measuring individual developers is just such a quick path to everyone stopping doing the important stuff that needs to be done in your team and in your organization. So based on that, I'd love to have some questions.
Anyone?
If you stick your hand up, the microphone will find its way to you like magic.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. What's your view on how to measure individual performance of developers? You said that it's a terrible thing to do, but sometimes management is curious about that and oftentimes takes wrong decisions. How would you suggest how to measure it and how to avoid wrong decision to make right decisions? Thank you.
Yes, that's a really good question. I think anyone who's managed a team is always interested in the performance of the individuals on their team. Very often there's external pressure. If you've ever managed a team, there will always be a situation where someone above you in the organization or sideways is like, we don't like Steve so much. Like, is he really performing? Can we get rid of him? Right? Those conversations come up. They're not very healthy. Most teams that I've worked on that have been successful have had real focus programmers, and they can just make stuff happen. They're brilliant. But they also have people doing glue work, and that's spreading information around the team, right? Getting information from users and bringing it back to the people who are real hands on keyboard. And these are the people that end up getting hurt by individual measures because they have fewer commits, they complete fewer features. A lot of the stuff that you would measure from a technical developer standpoint, they're not doing those. But once you remove them, the performance of all of your other developers starts dropping because they don't have that source of information anymore. So my call to action for managers is metrics do not tell you the value of someone in your team. And you have to do I'm a programmer, it's icky, it's horrible. You have to speak to people, you have to understand them, you have to understand their work. It gets all schmooshy and you can't automate a test around this. It's you just have to do the hard human work on it. You will sometimes have people who just aren't zinging on the team and it's not working. Understanding why that is, working out if this is the right place, that's like a tough discussion, but metrics are not going to lead you to those conversations. So do it in some other way that isn't based on metrics, is my perspective on that. That's a great question, thank you.
Thanks. One thing I wanted to ask about was, have you encountered cases where large amounts of what you would want to measure for metrics are coming through as unstructured data, for instance, log output or the amount of JIRA tickets or something like that? And if so, how did you address or would you recommend addressing that case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're lucky, there's already a dashboard in your tool that shows you metrics like this because the company's heard about DORA metrics and so they just put it in there. Hooray, job done. In a lot of other cases, you'll be like, half the information is in my work item management. There's another bit in my version control system. There's some more over here in the deployment automation. It's everywhere, right? And it can be quite tempting at that point to go and buy some kind of business intelligence platform. We'll integrate all of these things into it. We'll create dashboards, pie charts. It's going to be great. I would say start off by asking the 4 questions. So you can sit down with the team and say, how often do we deploy? How often does that go wrong, right? That's an okay place to start, and the investment is very low. In the absence of that, just look for something that is indicative of it. So you might have a system that can see part of that process, and that might be enough. And one good trick is to look at cycle times that you can see. So for example, your work item management system will tell you your cycle time for development, and then maybe your build system, your deployment system will tell you the other half of it, the factory part. Because the piece that happens before that commit is creative, you're thinking of design, you're solving problems, it's a bit variable. Once you hit commit, from then on it's like production line, right? It's automated, should just happen. It's not always, but the ideal. So yeah, don't overinvest in trying to make that all happen automatically. That won't be a problem unless you're having to do something at massive scale, and we're dealing at the team size. Okay, so yeah, thank you. We have another question over here. Oh, another one over here. Okay.
Hi, Steve. So I've got a question around one of your slides where you talked about code merge and approvals, right? So
yes.
Code review. Now, that's one of the pain points when you look at trying to move your code into production really fast. So I'm talking about a situation where you're moving from quarterly release to fortnightly release, and you need to hasten the process, make it go more smoothly, and have your developers' performance still on top. Now, is there, I wouldn't say automation, is there maybe automation or a process change that could help that bit of code review move more quickly in the whole chain?
Yeah, okay, so how do we make code reviews happen more swiftly? I suppose the research actually says trunk-based development is the answer to this. But the practical reality of that is there's a lot of organizations that aren't ready for that. They're like, we're worried about a code change just going in and there not being another person looking at it. So if you can obtain the ideal, it should be that everyone commits to trunk really frequently and those changes go through. You've got an automated pipeline that's doing all your validation. Okay, that's happy days. If you have to have a pull request, like you have to have this review stage, you need to understand that if that card is the one that's furthest right on your board, none of the other work you are doing is as urgent as that card, okay? It's like, that's the feature we decided to work on, it's the feature we decided to deliver, so why would we get it all the way to the point where we've got the code for it, and then we just stop and work on something that's not yet ready, okay? So prioritizing code review is probably the most important part. There may be tools coming that will help us automate that review process by summarizing what the changes are or scanning those changes for known problems. You know, the send all the rounding errors to my bank account, which is the thing we're all getting audited for. But I think it's about prioritization rather than trying to solve the problem of review. You know, the real solution would be to not have a queue stopping that change from moving forward. So yeah, great question. I think we'll come back over in a sec.
We won't.
Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Quick question. I think you touched on it there. It's a bit garbage in, garbage out. So it's great to develop a metrics, etc. But how do we know we're developing the right thing? What's the gate that we should be having in from a metrics perspective on the front end in terms of are we building the right thing in the first place?
Yeah, so this is crucial. So I was talking about user centricity earlier, and this question feeds into that because in the latest report from DORA, the one that came out a couple of months back, it's called 2024, but it's bang up to date, they found the teams that had very high software delivery performance, so they're making changes very frequently, very quickly, the reliability is all there, were being outperformed by teams that were moving more slowly, but who had really good connection to the users. So they knew that what they were delivering would solve the user's problem. And this is like a fundamental choice. You can try to just go for straight line speed so that you can have as many experiments as possible. Just keep trying feature ideas, right? That's one approach. And hopefully along the way you learn a little bit from seeing people not adopt features or adopt them for a bit and complain, right? You might get some feedback that way. But if you can be more user-centric, and that means being more deliberate, showing the features to the users, seeing how they respond to them, you can do a lot less coding. You can do far fewer features. You don't need to update your docs as often. Brilliant. So that's a really key point, okay? And the user centricity graph is amazing. I don't have it in this slide deck, but you can see for teams that don't connect to their users, their performance does creep up as they increase their software delivery performance, right? The product performs better as they can deliver software better. The user-centric teams are along the top the whole way along. Straight line, very high product performance. So user centricity is probably more important than the throughput and reliability, but you can't ignore the throughput and reliability. So I think we're out of time for questions, but I'm going to head over to the Octopus booth, and if anyone wants to come and ask questions and talk about metrics, that is my favorite subject, so come along and have a chat. Thank you very much.